All right. Thank you for joining us, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shahela Begum. I'm the program director of the Long Island Sound Community Impact Fund, and I'll pass it on to Kelly Marty.
Hi everyone, my name is Kelly Marty. I am the program associate for LISCIF, Long Island Sound Community Impact Fund. And yeah, I'll pass it on over to Connor.
Hey everyone, Connor Eucaitis. I work with the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters, and we'll get more onto who I am in a bit.
Yeah, and so a little bit about the Long Island Sound Community Impact Fund. We support with capacity building. So there's a lot of grants like grant writing, how to build a federal budget, and just we're working on another training on match, so folks can get like those bigger grants. And so the goals of the program are kind of twofold to help support marginalized communities, to support environmental projects, increasing access to Long Island Sound, and really creating a space for communities that haven't really received federal grants before. And so the other aspect is based on a needs assessment, we were able to understand what were the gaps in resources and what people needed to, what kind of trainings they needed to do better. And so one of the things that came up is grant writing, and just Connor has done a really amazing job these past few years, just helping us with these trainings and also at our annual learning exchange. And so we're just going to be talking about focusing on how to create a strong proposal. And this will be recorded and the slides will be provided to you afterwards as well. So if you have any colleagues who missed it, you can always share those resources out. And then if you have any questions, feel free to hold them and then we'll have an opportunity to have more discussion later. So I'll pass it on to Connor.
Thank you so much, Shahela, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. And I just want to shout out Liskif and Shahela and Kelly and the work that they do for not only putting on these trainings and putting on the annual learning exchange in New York City, but also for being like one of the big environmental groups out there that's still getting federal funding. So just like thank you so much for all the work that you do. Um, so anyways, I'm going to just quickly share my screen for a slideshow that I put together. And I will just make sure that from Shahela that you can all see this. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
coming in clear.
Perfect. Yeah, so my name is Connor Eucaitis. As I mentioned before, I work with the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters. We are a environmental nonprofit statewide, but we're based in Hartford. We are both a 501(c)(3) and a 501(c)(4). So we do, boots on the ground advocacy work. And then we also do lobbying up at the state capitol in Hartford. And for 4.5 years, I was the development director. So it was basically in charge of all the grant writing, major donor outreach, hosting fundraisers, things like that. And then in the past year or so, I worked my way up to deputy director, where I'm still doing fundraising. As I'm sure you all know, working for nonprofits, everyone has their hands in fundraising to some degree. And I've been working with Shahela, I think, for about 3 years. I've been to a number of learning exchanges and have been privileged to host training opportunities like this. So if at any point you have questions, please throw them in the chat. I know Shahela is going to help me with that. I will also share my contact details after this. It's actually been an amazing experience. I first of all, I'm always open for any questions, especially as you finalize your LOIs, your applications, whatever. Please reach out to me, call me, text me, email me. Through these trainings, I've actually had a lot of folks reach out over the years, and it's been really fun. So, um, okay, so building a strong narrative. What we're going to talk about today is, as you finalize or maybe even begin your letter of intent, and as you transition into the application process, it's really about storytelling. That's pretty much the most important thing you can convey because you don't have a huge opportunity to do that initially. You really want to sell yourself. So for me, like the reason I'll tell my quick story for a second. Um, The reason I got involved with the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters is when I was in high school, my parents pulled me and my sister out of school for a year. We rented an RV, we traveled around the country, we saw over 35 national parks, and that's when I fell in love with the environment. And as I grew older, realizing, just how much of the environment is at stake, and kind of the detrimental impacts that humans have had on it, I knew I wanted to get into politics to some degree, but didn't really like campaigning. So, working for an environmental nonprofit, ended up being my calling. And the reason I bring that up is because it's really important when for those of you who are going to be, writing the LOI or working with your staff to draft your LOI, it really is about telling a story very briefly for your organization. And I would encourage you all to practice, among your coworkers or your boards to really think about what drives you to do the work that you do today, because I'm sure you have all thought of it, but it helps to be reminded, especially when you're, applying for funding to complete a specific project. Um, so let's talk quickly about a letter of intent versus a full proposal. Um, Letter of intent is kind of it's broad, really meant to outline what you're trying to achieve, and it's really focused on kind of that initial storytelling. Um, the full proposal is where you're going to kind of hash out your specific details, like how do we actually achieve A, B, and C. But it's really the letter of intent that is kind of very broad, and it really you want to capture the funder's attention. So thinking about creative ways to stand out, thinking about inspiring stories that your organization may have had initially to kind of allude to, can be very, very useful. I also wanted to just pay some attention to the funding themes for this year. I know they've changed a little bit over the past few years that I've been doing this, but really are pretty consistent as well. So clean waters and healthy watersheds, absolutely love that. Thriving habitats and abundant wildlife, sustainable and resilient communities, and then informed and engaged public, which Shahela, I believe that's the new one this year. Which is really, really interesting because, as you're all probably acutely aware, when you turn on the TV, it is very, difficult to decipher what is actually fact and what is not. So love that that is a theme this year. So you definitely want to make sure that your letter of intent is hitting on either a specific theme or even, I think you could probably bring in other themes and have some cross-pollination that way would be helpful. It is not going to the next slide. Hold on one second. Whoop, there we go. Sorry. And also reminding everyone of the funding priorities. And reminder, I mean, I'm sure people have seen this, but in case you haven't, the funding priorities for this round of applications, projects that result in quantifiable pollutant prevention or reduction, restoring habitat within important coastal habitat types targeted by the LIS partnership, projects that foster a diverse, balanced, and abundant population of fish, birds, and wildlife, public engagement, knowledge, and stewardship, projects that enhance community resilience and sustainability, planning and design that set the stage for implementation of water quality projects, eligible habitat restoration projects and resilience projects, community-based science projects, data management and integration projects, and other similar activities that the applicant proposes and EPA approves that are consistent with Section 119 of the Clean Water Act. I'm sure you all probably have a better idea of what those mean because my background is more kind of broad Connecticut-based policy. But if you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to LISCIF staff about that. But it seems like just looking at environmental issues as a whole, like there are a lot of different directions these projects can go. And so that's kind of the point of a letter of intent. You don't necessarily have to know exactly what you are going to do or how you're going to do it. I know from my personal experience, when funding opportunities come up, um, I have thought initially like, oh my God, I have to, know every in and out of this grant, even in the initial round of applying for it. because I may get all of these technical questions. But the whole purpose of a of intent is to kind of broadly outline your idea and gauge whether or not there's interest to fund it. So I want to remind everyone of that. If you feel overwhelmed or like you should know, the answer to every question, it's totally okay to not have that yet. It's really about setting the vision for your organization or your project. I always encourage people to think about the greater context. Um, how does your project or this funding opportunity make a larger impact? I know after having been to some of the learning exchanges, meeting with previous folks that have been funded, I know there are a lot of like hyper local community organizations that may be applying for funds, which is fantastic because that's where the real change happens. But it's always important to think about, does this serve a neighboring community? Does this serve a region? I like to think about it. I live in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, so I'm right along the Connecticut River. If I were, a part of a group in Rocky Hill that wants to clean up, let's say, part of the shoreline, which is right up the street from where I live, how would that serve the communities that live downstream from that project? That's something you may want to mention in your letter of intent, because I can tell you, funders always love to see that the work that they're funding goes beyond the communities that they're initially trying to help out. Positivity always wins. This is definitely, I think, becoming more and more important every day because, like I said, if you turn on the TV, especially if you're an environmentally focused group, the news just seems to get worse and worse every day. And some people may be inclined to, and this is speaking from my own experience, to address that in the letter of intent and make that the focal point, like, oh, things are really bad, like we need your money right now. You can do that, but it's definitely more impactful to take a positive spin. How is the current state of the world or the current state of your community or your watershed, or how does this present a positive opportunity to make change? So when you're drafting your letter of intent, I would ask you to, or encourage you to share it among your staff and your board and read it from a perspective of, is this too negative or is this presenting a positive opportunity? I always love this Maya Angelou quote. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. Because like I mentioned earlier, grant writing is really about storytelling. And to be some of the most effective grant writers that I've met are people who are able to share their own story to others most effectively. So, like I mentioned, I think a really, really great training and also just kind of internal like community building among your organization exercise would be to take turns just sharing your story of why you got involved with this group to begin with. And then take it a step further. Why does your organization feel that you're worthy of the funding and worthy to carry forth this project? You'd be amazed at the kind of conversations that take place. And then just food for thought. As I mentioned before, things to just keep in mind as you're writing this, as you're thinking about, building your story. What would I change in the world? What gives me hope? And how can I share my story with others to make the biggest impact? These are really like three really fundamental questions that I think will help get the creative juices flowing, and can help guide both building your personal story, then also creating, the story for your organization, your letter of intent. What is the story behind this project? What are we trying to achieve? Who can we inspire? Why does this give people hope? So I like to think of cover letter, letter of intent versus like a full proposal, kind of like if you're applying for a new job. Um, your letter of intent is more your cover letter, right? It's you have not even had an interview set up. They're going to be looking through a bunch of them before they even make a phone call back. So it's your chance to build a little bit of a narrative and tell your story. So you want to make it personal, emotional, and concise. And I promise you, you can do that from the perspective of an organization, which is why I think having those internal conversations with your staff and board beforehand are important. Because if you're all sharing your personal stories, you may find common themes amongst your staff. Certain words that you may want to use in your letter of intent, like, oh, we found that passion is something that comes up among people. Well, we're an organization that's built on passion. Um, it helps connect authentically with your audience and it grabs their attention initially so that you will get that call back to basically submit a formal application, right? That's when a company calls you back and it says, we really liked your cover letter and we want to invite you in for a resume, or sorry, an interview where we can dive into your resume a little more in depth. And that's where you're going to go, data driven, talk about metrics. How are you going to achieve these goals? What's your timeline? Things like that. You don't really need to worry about any of that right now. But it is helpful to think about as you're drafting your letter of intent. It's something, if you're able to kind of map that out as you're drafting this, that's fantastic. If you're still unsure, at the very least, think broadly, think of like the 50,000 foot level. Um, what at the end of the day, why are you trying to get the funder's attention in the first place? And then, there are plenty of exercises to do to kind of help carve out the details. So, like I said, it's all about your personal story. Your organization's story really is a collective of your staff and your board's personal stories. So I'd certainly encourage you all to really think about that, sit folks down, talk about that, and talk about it as it relates to, this funding opportunity. How can we use our personal stories to achieve, the goals we're trying to set out in this funding opportunity? And how can we continue to use our personal stories to build our organization's story? So good stories should, and this goes for both your personal one and your organization's one. First and foremost, it should make people feel. People act when they feel. We are seeing this, it seems like every week. I mean, just this past weekend with the rallies being held around the country, right? People felt that, so they acted. They showed up. They came out. Um, you want to be remembered. People certainly remember a powerful story. I would actually invite you as you're doing these kind of personal exercises and exercises among staff, ask each other, like, what's the most impactful story you've heard throughout your life? Because I'm sure everyone has one. You want to create understanding. Um, we've been sharing stories since the dawn of time. In fact, I think, even before there was written language, right? There were stories etched on walls and cave drawings and things like that. That's kind of the universal language that is passed down through generations and millennia. It helps you cut through the clutter. Like I said, there's too much online disinformation these days, too much cable TV, too many fake talking points and things like that. At the end of the day, the environment is, in my personal opinion, I'm biased, but I think I'm in a pretty safe space. It's the most important thing that you can protect right now, because it really is the future of generations, right? Clean air, clean water, access to natural resources, a healthy, safe environment is so important these days. So it's a story that really resonates with people. And unfortunately, as the impacts of climate change and pollution get worse, um, I, I think people are becoming more and more in tune with that conversation. So it's really a golden opportunity to share that story and express, how are you, what's your part in this story? Good stories build organizational structure. It shows your audience when you're connecting with them that you hear them, that you understand them, and that you relate to them. And then it also can help wake people up. Um, while you may be sharing a story with someone who's familiar with the work that you do, resonates with you, that can be very impactful. But what's more impactful are sharing stories with someone who's maybe, either completely out of touch or completely on the other end of, a belief system and watching them, take it in and have their minds changed or have them resonate with it in even a small way, can be really, really impactful. And that's how you find common ground. And then some tips for building a narrative. Again, short and sweet. an LOI should and Shahela, I apologize. I should know this, but I don't know if there may be a page or two limit on that. I would double check. But definitely try to keep it very simple. A good letter of intent should be very concise, short and sweet. Um, you want to show, don't tell. Use senses and emotions to tell your story. Talk about the direct impacts of, whether it's pollution in a local stream. How has that impacted the community? How has that made them feel? Um, think story versus an essay. Again, this is a short story opportunity to build your case, to gather attention. The essay part will come when you get the opportunity to submit your full application, when you can dive into the details. This is really about presenting in a short, sweet, succinct way your case, how you can make change. Also be original. There are plenty of environmental groups out there. Most of them are trying to do positive things in the world. How does yours stand out? How do you stand out, at your organization? So really bring it to a personal level so that you can show that your organization is original. And even if it's an idea that has been replicated from other organizations, find creative ways to make it your own. Also, yeah, limit your data. Your letter of intent should not be too data driven. You don't want to throw a bunch of numbers. It's hard to throw a lot of numbers into a short story. So maybe a couple of key talking points. I would say like one or two, provided that those numbers really I guess, are emotional. That's where, because there's going to be plenty of time in your full proposal to throw a bunch of numbers, statistics, things like that. I would say pick the most emotional numbers if they're needed to throw in your letter of intent. And then also look ahead. From a funder's perspective, they want to see that their funding has a lasting impact, that it is not just a project that is like, okay, we did this and we're done. It should always lead to a next step and expansion, whether that's expansion in your local community, whether that's, like I mentioned earlier, expanding to a regional impact. You should really be thinking long term, and conveying that this is the start of something new that is lasting. And then diversity and equity. How does your story relate and impact others? And I know this is something that came up at the Learning Exchange for those of you who were there. Um, we live in a world, unfortunately, where equity and inclusion are almost trigger words at the federal government level, which can be very difficult to navigate. Um, as a grant writer, I would say to still continue to focus on that, but as it impacts, numerous communities, expanding communities, things like that. I know there was a talk that was given about, different words that you could use during the learning exchange. So I would refer people back to that. It is very difficult these days to navigate that when there's federal funding, but I would just, continue to focus on the fact that your story, your organization's story is making a lasting impact on the communities that surround you, and it is the start to something that will bring even more communities into the conversation. So as I mentioned, I know I've got some next steps for you to all consider. I know that the deadline for the letter of intent is coming up, but exercises that you can do among your staff and your board that might help, you know, figure out what exactly it is, how exactly you want to present your project. You could write down 5 reasons why you love your job. Think about the mission, values, and goals. Um, what stories have emerged from your experience? So again, thinking about what you've gone through throughout your life. Maybe they're even environmentally related. Maybe there was some experience you had as a child, or um, while you were at school in college, or another, different job opportunity. How has that really shaped who you are? How has that made you unique? And making sure that you bring staff and board into the conversation. This will help you bring or identify patterns and similarities that you all have together. I mean, you all work together. You all decided you wanted to take this job for this organization or this project, this group. Clearly, there are similarities there, but it can take a little bit of work, especially if you're a smaller organization, to identify those similarities. Those similarities are going to help identify what it is that you bring to the table to complete this project and why you deserve funding. Um, and then I would encourage you to, find three more people to join in that conversation, right? Nonprofits are all about building your membership, building your base, expanding support. Um, I volunteer for a couple of different organizations that, have no staff. I'm actually on a working board, and we only have, three or four volunteers. Thinking long term, how do I bring in someone that may be interested in that? Because that is going to help guide the future of your organization. It's also going to expand on future funding opportunities. You never know what volunteer you might bring in who sits on a board of another organization or knows someone that has some money that they're, looking to throw around to invest in a project. So definitely always thinking about how do you grow your organization from a grassroots level, because then you're capturing more stories, more experience, and more funding opportunities. So with that is the end of my presentation. I will open it up for any questions, comments, things like that.
Thank you so much, Connor. And as we mentioned before, all the slides and the recording will be uploaded and it'll be shared out to you, but we can definitely take some questions or if you have any questions about the proposal itself. You can also come off mute or use the chat option as well.
I will also say that we have a storytelling worksheet that we used at the Learning Exchange and I think in previous trainings that I will send to Shahela to make available for everyone.
Thank you, Connor.
Yeah.
I will say, I guess, as if people are thinking about questions, I'm getting a lot of questions from people who were previously funded from different rounds with us. And I
Mhm.
think one advice that I would give to people is if you're putting in another application for additional funding, really leverage on your impact that you made with your first grant. Because some of the comments that I get from the review team is like, oh, these are you previously funded X group. It would have been nice to see like, what happened. And it doesn't have to be all positive. It could be like challenges you experience. Maybe you need additional funding to fill those challenges. But I would definitely say like bring the previous funding into your writing and like kind of talk about your impacts if you have any of the results and things like that.
Yeah, I would echo that too. Do not be afraid to share things that you learned, like we would do better this time. A funder doesn't always necessarily, and I've heard this from like private, individual funders who want to actually hear what are the challenges. They're almost more concerned about the challenges than the wins, right? It's like, how did you grow as an organization? So don't be afraid to say, oh, we could have done this better, because it's a learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I will like echo also Connor's point of just being like very like answering the questions that we ask you. So you will have an opportunity if you get invited for the full proposal to elaborate more. But I think because we get so many letters of intent, um I think like getting to the point and using like with using your text within the word count is very efficient. So also advise you to get in the application and just get a draft started if you are like working on a draft like on Word or like a notepad, having maybe that separately saved so you can always just copy and paste certain parts. Sometimes people end up getting on the platform like the day of where the proposals are due, and they may run through technical issues and things like that. So just to prevent that, but if we need to assist you like earlier on, we can do that as well.
Yeah, I cannot emphasize enough to like definitely start your application like right after this call, because one of the very first grants I ever applied to when I was like 8 years ago, I did wait until the day of and the whole database crashed and
Yeah.
Yeah. Luckily, they
Exactly.
still accepted it, but I was like almost in tears the whole day. So please, like, just get yourself registered and start the application today.
And you can, we're using like a new platform called Amplifund, so you can have like multiple team members on it as well with their own logins to kind of help you build out the application. But if there are no further questions, you know where to reach myself. Kelly will be sharing Connor's info out as well. And good luck with everything. And if you'd like to get on a support call with Kelly and me, happy to kind of look at your proposal or talk about ideas, alignment with the CCMP moving forward. We still have like about a month left to kind of prepare for that. And then also we're working on statewide learning exchanges. We got additional funding to have events in Connecticut and New York. So we're just trying to schedule venues and dates for that as well. So we'll keep you posted if you're not already signed up to the newsletter. And thank you so much for attending and, you know, spending your afternoon with us. And thank you so much, Connor, once again for giving a phenomenal training. And
No,
again, if
happy
you
to do
need,
it. And yeah,
yeah,
Shahid, like I said, Blake, please, I encourage folks to email me if they have questions. Like, oh, how does this look? Like, I'm always happy to take a look. I did that for a few folks last time I did this training, so um, more than happy to.
yeah, thank you so much, Connor. And especially with the new edition of the CCMP, if you need any help digesting any of the implementation actions or alignment, please feel free to reach out. But yeah, thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and your week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.